Some stories don't begin with a crime scene. They begin in whispers, in quiet towns, in families where secrets are carefully hidden. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a case that has stunned Texas, a case where a mansion, a family, and a pond hold more questions than answers. What was really happening behind those gates? And why does every new discovery only deepen the mystery? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you may find yourself questioning not just what happened, but who wanted the truth buried. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't, so you get to know as we uncover more details on this matter. Just after dawn in Liberty County, Texas, a chilling call pierced through the calm of the sheriff's dispatch line. The man on the other end wasn't calm. He was frantic, his voice breaking as he begged deputies to come quickly. Something was happening at his home, something he claimed was life or death. That man was 61-year-old Domingo Quintana, the owner of Rancho Monte Carmelo, a sprawling gated estate valued at over $3 million. To neighbors, the property stood as a symbol of wealth and privacy. But to deputies racing toward it that morning, it was about to become a crime scene shrouded in confusion. On the call, Quintana said his wife, a 39-year-old mother of three, had done the unthinkable. He claimed she had drugged their children with NyQuil and then tried to lead them into the pond behind the mansion. He suggested she intended not only to drown the children, but to take her own life as well. Deputies knew every second mattered. They sped through rural roads, sirens blaring, not knowing what awaited them behind the tall gates of Quintana's home. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. 3 children, ages 6, 11, and 15, were wet, their clothes clinging to them. Nearby, Quintana himself was drenched, and in the pond, deputies spotted the mother still in the water. Without hesitation, they rushed in and pulled her out. At first glance, Quintana appeared to be the hero. According to Liberty County Sheriff's Captain David Myers, it's our belief that the father is the one that pulled some of the kids out of the water. The kids were wet, the dad was wet, and the mother was still in the water. But investigators didn't stop there. Despite his cooperation, detectives made it clear they were looking at both parents. Was Quintana the desperate rescuer he appeared to be? Or was there more to this story than anyone realized? That hesitation from law enforcement added a dark layer of uncertainty. Neighbors were stunned. Rancho Monte Carmelo wasn't the kind of place where flashing lights and emergency sirens were expected. To see deputies dragging bodies from the water in the mansion's backyard was almost unthinkable. Yet, that morning, the unimaginable had happened. Bottles of over-the-counter medication were reportedly recovered at the scene. Officers described the unfolding investigation as bizarre, even breathtaking, not because of the property's grandeur, but because of the horrific allegations tied to it. By the end of the morning, 3 children had been rushed to hospitals, their conditions uncertain. The mother was in critical care, and the father, the man whose desperate call brought deputies rushing, stood at the center of a case that was already raising more questions than answers. What really happened behind the gates of that Texas mansion? For now, investigators weren't giving clear answers. But one thing was certain: this story was only beginning. As the sun rose higher over Liberty County, flashing lights faded from the gates of Rancho Monte Carmelo. But inside the emergency rooms of 2 local hospitals, the fight for survival had only just begun. The 3 children, pulled shivering and soaked from the estate's pond, were rushed away in separate ambulances. Their conditions were not immediately released. Doctors later confirmed they were being treated not only for the trauma of near drowning, but also for possible drug ingestion. Bottles of NyQuil, a common nighttime cold medicine, had been collected from home, raising grim questions about what the children might have swallowed before being led into the water. Their mother, still in critical condition, was admitted under close observation. She had to be pulled from the pond by deputies, and medical staff confirmed her condition was serious. Whether she had taken the same substances she allegedly gave her children remained unclear. For investigators, every minute of her recovery mattered, because if she survived, she might be the only one able to explain what happened in those terrifying early hours. Meanwhile, Domingo Quintana, the father, the homeowner, the man who dialed 911, did not leave the scene in an ambulance. He stayed, speaking with investigators who swarmed the mansion's grounds. At first glance, Quintana seemed like the desperate father who would save his children. His clothes were drenched, and Captain David Myers publicly noted the father's apparent heroism. The kids were wet, the dad was wet, and the mother was still in the water, he told reporters. But as hours passed, law enforcement made one thing clear. They weren't ruling him out. Investigators openly admitted they were looking at both parents as possible suspects. That statement sent shockwaves through the community. Why would the sheriff's office hesitate to call Quintana a hero outright? What had deputies seen or heard that morning that cast doubt on his version of events? In criminal cases, uncertainty can be more chilling than certainty. Was this a mother's shocking attempt to harm her children? Or was there a deeper family conflict hidden behind the high walls of Rancho Monte Carmelo? Detectives began searching for any evidence that might explain why or how such an ordeal could have unfolded inside a multi-million-dollar estate. Neighbors, many of whom only glimpsed the property's gates from afar, struggled to process the news. Some described the Quintanas as private, even reclusive. Few knew what life was really like inside the lavish mansion, and that secrecy only fed the speculation. By the day's end, officials confirmed that all 3 children were expected to survive. That was the one piece of good news in an otherwise grim story. But their survival did not bring clarity. In fact, it made the questions sharper, because now, investigators knew they would eventually have first-hand accounts from the children themselves. Would those accounts confirm their father's frantic call for help, or would they reveal something far more disturbing? The answers, everyone realized, were coming, but they might not be the answers the community was ready to hear. From the outside, Rancho Monte Carmelo seemed like a dream. A sprawling Liberty County estate with a massive iron gate and a mansion reportedly worth more than $3 million. Built in 2017, it stood as a symbol of wealth and success. But investigators would soon learn that behind those gates, the story was far from perfect. Neighbors described the property as impressive but isolated. Few people were ever invited inside, and the Quintana family's life remained shrouded in mystery. That privacy, detectives began to suspect, may have hidden troubling dynamics. When deputies scoured the grounds after the pond incident, they weren't just looking for medicine bottles or signs of struggle. They were also checking for anything that might explain the sudden chaos. What they reportedly discovered shocked even seasoned investigators. A cat emaciated and locked inside a shop building on the property. The building lacked air conditioning, and there was no food or water in the bowl left behind. The find led to an unexpected twist. Within hours, Domingo Quintana, the same father who had called 911, was arrested and booked into the Liberty County Jail. His charge? Animal cruelty, a misdemeanor under Texas law. It was a development that left many asking the same question. Why would authorities charge the father over a cat, when just hours earlier, his family had nearly drowned in a pond? Sheriff's deputies made it clear. The cruelty case was separate from the pond incident. Still, the arrest fueled speculation. Was this charge merely a coincidence of timing, or was law enforcement quietly signaling deeper suspicions about Quintana himself? Court records soon added more layers. In Harris County, where Houston sits, Quintana had been sued in 2023 over debt-related issues. In January 2024, a court ruled against him, ordering him to pay more than $138,000. That wasn't his only financial burden. In Liberty County, officials filed a lawsuit accusing him of failing to pay years of property taxes on 72 acres of land. The county claimed he owed over $43,000. Taken together, these details painted a different picture of the family behind Rancho Monte Carmelo. Instead of untouchable wealth, there were signs of financial strain. Instead of stability, there were lawsuits, debts, and now a criminal charge. Deputies also revealed they had been called to property before, possibly for reports of assault. They did not clarify who was involved, but their admission hinted at past conflict inside the estate. Child Protective Services stepped in after the pond incident, though officials said the agency had no prior history with the family. By this stage, the public perception of Domingo Quintana had shifted. Was he a desperate father who saved his children? Or was he a man under pressure, financial, personal, and possibly criminal, whose private life was beginning to unravel? As the sun set over Liberty County that evening, one fact was undeniable. The gates of Rancho Monte Carmelo no longer concealed just a mansion. They concealed secrets. Secrets now being pried open by investigators determined to learn the truth. By now, investigators had a tangled web of facts. 3 children pulled from a pond, bottles of NyQuil discovered on the property, a critically ill mother, and a father facing an animal cruelty charge. But none of it answered the most urgent question: why did this happen? Detectives admitted they weren't sure. At first, the story seemed straightforward. A mother allegedly drugging her children and tried to lead them to their deaths. That was, after all, what Domingo Quintana claimed when he dialed 911. But inconsistencies soon complicated that narrative. When deputies arrived, they saw Quintana already pulling children from the water. Yet the mother remained submerged until law enforcement physically removed her. If Quintana was able to save the children, why didn't he rescue his wife as well? Authorities have not offered a clear explanation. And then there was the sheriff's puzzling statement. Investigators were looking at both parents. That admission cut against the assumption that this was a one-sided attack. Were there doubts about Quintana's version of events? Was law enforcement privately considering whether this incident had more than one suspect? Or perhaps a completely different story than the one first reported? The mystery deepened when journalists pressed deputies on whether financial troubles may have played a role. Records confirmed that Quintana was drowning in debt, with judgments totaling over $180,000 and active lawsuits hanging over him. Could desperation or stress inside the household have fueled a collapse? Authorities didn't say. They declined to comment directly on finances, though they acknowledged reporters' questions were not unfounded. Meanwhile, the children, 15, 11, and 6 years old, became the key to unlocking the truth. 2 were stable enough to speak eventually. If investigators could hear directly from them, the entire trajectory of the case could shift. Their testimony might confirm their father's account, pointing to the mother as the primary aggressor. Or it could reveal something darker, a family imploding under hidden pressures, where both parents bore responsibility. Child Protective Services now had custody of the case, though the children remained hospitalized under watchful care. Their voices were not just important for prosecutors, but for their own safety and future. What they revealed could determine whether they returned home, entered state custody, or were placed with extended family. Behind the gates of Rancho Monte Carmelo, silence lingered. The estate itself stood as a haunting backdrop. Manicured lawns surrounding a pond now marked as a crime scene, towering gates shielding what law enforcement increasingly described as bizarre and breathtaking circumstances. In cases like this, motive is often the final puzzle piece. But here, even motive was elusive. Was this a mother's mental health crisis spiraling out of control? A desperate act tied to financial ruin? Or something else altogether, hidden beneath years of secrecy? For now, investigators had more questions than answers, and the only certainty was this. The Quintana children held the key to the mystery, but the world was still waiting for them to speak. Every case has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But here in Liberty County, Texas, the story of Domingo Quintana and his family feels unfinished, suspended somewhere between accusation and revelation. The facts we know are chilling. 3 children dragged from the waters of a private pond. Bottles of NyQuil scattered across a mansion worth millions. A father calling 911, only to be charged days later with animal cruelty. A mother in critical condition, silent, unable to defend or explain herself. And children whose voices may be the only ones left to unravel what really happened. Law enforcement continues to tread carefully. Officially, there is no single suspect. They've made it clear both parents remain under scrutiny. That detail alone suggests investigators believe the public story may not tell the whole truth. But here's the haunting part. If silence can be dangerous, then time can be just as deadly. The longer it takes to hear from surviving children, the more the narrative risks being shaped by speculation rather than fact. And already, speculation is running wild. Was this a failed murder-suicide, a desperate financial escape plan, or something far more complicated? Buried behind those mansion gates under the name Rancho Monte Carmelo, for neighbors and the wider community, shock has turned into unease. How could a family living in wealth, a family tucked inside a sprawling gated estate, be hiding such chaos? Deputies describe what they saw as breathtaking, not because of beauty, but because of horror. The mansion, once a dream home, is now forever marked as a crime scene. Meanwhile, Quintana's legal troubles outside the pond incident refuse to fade. Court documents show mounting debts and tax disputes. Even if unrelated to the pond, they paint a picture of a man under immense pressure. The animal cruelty charge only adds to the contradictions. How could a man hailed as a rescuer also be accused of neglect so severe that a cat was found emaciated and locked away without food or water? And yet, despite the shocking headlines, much remains hidden. We don't know what the children will say when they are strong enough to speak. We don't know whether the mother will recover enough to explain her actions. And we don't know whether Domingo Quintana is the desperate hero he claimed to be, or a figure entangled in a much darker story. This is where the case stands. Not closed, not clear, but caught in the fog of investigation. For now, we are left staring at the gates of Rancho Monte Carmelo, wondering what secrets remain inside and whether justice will truly see the light. Until the voices of those who lived through are heard, the world is left with fragments: a pond, a mansion, a family, and questions that refuse to be silenced. Because sometimes the scariest part of the story is not what we know, but what's still missing. And that's where this story leaves us, at the gates of a Texas mansion, with more questions and answers. Was this the unraveling of a family under pressure, a mother's mental health crisis, or something far more complex? One thing is clear: the truth is still out there, waiting to be uncovered. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe Domingo Quintana was a desperate father trying to save his kids? Or do the cracks in the story suggest something darker? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be reading through and featuring some of your responses in future updates. If you've been following this case closely, make sure you hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next development. Trust me, there will be more twists ahead. And if you think others should hear this story, share this video. The more people talking about it, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay buried. Because at the end of the day, stories like this aren't just headlines. They're warnings about silence, about hidden struggles, and about what can happen when cries for help go unanswered. This is True Crime Case Files, and together, we'll keep asking the questions that others won't. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.